Welcome back to the channel and Happy New Year. I, like all of you, am hoping that 2021 is better than 2020. But let's talk about the channel. One thing that we were supposed to do in 2020 was get the X back down to Hoonigans. Maybe some of you recall that the Hoonigans covered the X in build biology. I was supposed to go back for the X to do daily transmission. On top of that, the 7 was supposed to go down and do build biology and daily transmission as well. But like many of your plans, my plans became unpenned and it didn't happen. So maybe that'll happen in 2021. However, I don't even know how many of you are interested in seeing that anymore. If you are interested, comment down below. Let me know you want me to do it, and we'll see what we can do about getting that to happen. Now, what are we in right now? We're in my Hummer H1. For those of you that have asked me if I still have it, well, here's your answer. This was sitting for quite some time. Not as long as the 7, but it had been sitting in storage for over 10 years. And I hadn't driven it. So the main thing for me is that I felt I should probably get it running so it just doesn't rot away. I feel bad about that. Unfortunately, that was a larger undertaking than I thought. My suspicion is that very few, if any of you, are interested in how I brought this back to life. So instead of doing a whole bunch of videos, I'll just run through it real quick. Well, as all of you know, if you leave a car for any amount of time, the batteries are shot. Now I'm kind of bummed because what I wanted to do was put anti-gravity lithium-ion batteries in this vehicle. Not that it matters because it's insanely heavy. It weighs over 7,000 pounds. But they couldn't allow me to run them in parallel. And batteries are like a necessary evil for me. They're always a pain in the butt. And I used to like to use interstate batteries, but as of late, since they aren't made here in the US, I get terrible performance and life out of them. So what I've been switched to is Odyssey Batteries, and they use virgin lead. For those of you that hate dealing with batteries as much as I do, always ask if the manufacturer uses virgin lead. That'll make a huge difference. Well worth the few dollars for the longevity you get out of the batteries. And of course, the AC, non-functional. And the Hummer gets very hot as everything is elevated for ground clearance. So it becomes like an oven in here. Well, luckily I was able to chase that down, and lo and behold, the AC compressor was leaking. But between you and I'd rather it be that, because it's easier for me to change the compressor than chase all the lines. And as most of you remember from my stories, dye is really a bad thing. I mean, it works, but it creates all sorts of other problems that tend to come back to haunt you. Now, the other thing that happened was some of the lights had gone out. And I think they're actually connections, but since I was in there, I figured, why not change to LEDs? I must admit, I just like the way LED lighting looks a lot better. So I updated those. So after doing a service on the Hummer, as all of you would do after leaving it for 10 years, it still wouldn't start. My suspicion was that the diesel had not gone bad, because if it had been fuel, for sure I'd be sunk. But since this is diesel, which, I mean, this is actually a real diesel. When you drive it, you can tell it's a diesel, not like the newer ones that are just quiet, which both have their advantages, but in that way I'm just kind of old school. What I determined was that the injector pump wasn't working. But when I got into it, I found that it wasn't actually the injector pump, it was a module or driver that they call. So I was able to upgrade that and relocate it, because it seems to be susceptible to heat. So I was able to move it out by the batteries. That seemed to rectify the problem. And of course, you know it's running. Now, of course, me being someone like all of you and can't not mess with things, since I was in there anyway and the injector pump was out, I decided I should upgrade the turbo. Again, I don't know if that really matters in the Hummer, because I believe it makes a whopping 195 horsepower. I don't know what it makes now with the turbo. It isn't much faster, but still by far the slowest vehicle in my fleet. Okay, the racing significance of this car. Well, I didn't race it obviously because it's the slowest car I have. So you have the slowest car, and barring the race cars, my fastest car, which would be the SV. They both have pluses and minuses. If you want to get somewhere fast, the Hummer is not the way to go. The Hummer is about presence. And in honesty, the weird thing about the Hummer is that it has the best demographics of any vehicle. What I'll say is that young, old, females, males, a lot of people like the Hummer. And I tend to like it even more now because it's more rare. You don't get that with a lot of my other cars. The Lambos, the Ferraris, there's a certain group of people that like them. There's a whole nother group of people that just hate them, or hate me, or the person driving it, just because. And I'm fine with that. It is what it is, right? But the Hummer just drives well. It's like no other vehicle I have, and it served a huge purpose for me because it was my tow vehicle. And it was great because a lot of people liked it. So if you didn't like the 7, didn't like the X, maybe it had a little bit of something for everyone, and the Hummer was the way to go. Now, the one thing about the Hummer I'll say is that I don't know about any of you if you drive Hummers, but you just kind of get a bit of an attitude or chip on your shoulder, like you just want to run into people because it's so large. I'll admit, I'm susceptible to that. That is why I love the Hummer. You get in these situations where I do drive off-road because obviously my parents and my family own a lot of farmland, which I have to cover, and typically I'll use my Raptor, but the Hummer's a ton of fun. But I will say in off-road, the Raptor can cover ground much faster. Although getting through obstacles, you're not going to beat the Hummer, period. And the road presence, it's insane. As you saw, we just passed some bikers, and I don't even fit in the lane with them. We have to take another lane, which is good and bad. Again, it comes back to presence. However, you definitely want to make sure you're not going to run anybody over. And the seating position is odd because you're way off on one side, which is great because, again, it adds to the mystique of being unique. But for those of you that are single, not like me, who's married and my life is over, not the best date car because you have to yell over to your date. And as far as getting close to your date in any way, shape, or form, not going to happen. So, for me, for my daughter Natalia, this will most likely be her first car. If not this one, I'll buy another one. That way I can keep any sort of date, friend, long ways away from her. It's a good plan. Now, talking about performance of the Hummer, well, as you can imagine, it's horrid. Like we talked about, it has 195 horsepower, although with my upgraded turbo, God, sky's the limit, right? And it weighs 7,000 pounds plus. As far as handling goes, the Hummer does pretty well. I mean, as I said, it makes a whopping 195 horsepower. Mine would make more because of the turbo upgrade. Doesn't matter, probably not. Over 7,000 pounds. In factory trim, it made around 430 pounds of torque. Now it does have gear reductions, so it makes a ton more torque than actually what the output of the motor is. But it would be best probably discussed when we talk about the off-road capabilities of this thing. But as far as driving, it's not really that bad. The ride is good, the turning radius is good. And since it's wide, it actually handles pretty well. As you can see here. Now, I don't know that I would go out and drive it against any of my other cars like the Ferraris. Or the Lambos. But SUV to SUV, it's pretty hard to beat this. Now, the big problem, parts. Just like I'm always talking about the NSX. As these cars get older and they're not making any more of these. However, I'm sure someone's going to comment and say, but Adam, they're making the electric one. That is true. But obviously it doesn't use the same components as this. Parts are getting harder and harder to come by. Okay, a couple other things that I'll mention. The fuel economy in this is horrid. Not for the faint of heart. I mean, it is probably right around the same range of the SV and the Mercy, which huge difference. 195 horsepower, 750 horsepower, and getting the same mileage of like 4 to 7 miles per gallon can be quite taxing. But in the Hummer's defense, it is pushing a lot more air. Well, it looks like we have a straight here to really open it up. So what I will do is shut off the AC and let's see what happens. wow, you can really hear it winding out, and pretty soon we're gonna make it to the end of this road. That is full tilt. And there you have it. If that did not seem fast to all of you, that would be because it is insanely slow. If I remember correctly, this car holds many records, one being like the slowest 0 to 60 known to man. But all kidding aside, the vehicle's great. It really gives you that feeling that you could survive Armageddon, so I have to keep it in case something does happen. But other than that, now what we should do is go and drive on the off-road so you can see that side of it. Before we head out and check out the Hummer's off-road capabilities, I thought it might be good to take a look at what it was really designed for me at least, and that is towing. Right now, the 7. I don't know about you, but some problems do come up. The first is, it is insanely loud in here. First of all, you have the engine. Then, that deafening sound in the back is a weld and fuel pump. On top of that, with all the custom work that was done and all the sound dampening removed, not only does the sound transfer through everything, but the smell of exhaust just keeps you awake and alert, or possibly asphyxiated. One of the two. So here's a way to do it. Well, there you go. The benefit of the Hummer towing is that you can shut the engine off and still get to your destination. Now, of course, one problem is my windows don't roll down, which it is insanely hot in here in the dead of winter. So, what can we do for that? Well, luckily for me, we kept my sunroof in. Now, would the 7 have gone faster without the sunroof? Absolutely. Would I have died from heat stroke? Very possibly. Now I can enjoy the nice fresh air while the Hummer tows me and gets me to my destination. This is also a great benefit because the clutch is very, very heavy and it wears very fast. It's only designed to do one thing, which makes driving on the street not impossible, but very difficult. But the transmission is a whole nother story. Because those of you that aren't familiar with the G-force transmission, it only stays in gear under power. It will stay in 5th and reverse. But other than that, you have to stay under power. And to put it back into gear, you have to come to a complete stop. Now, if you're super strong like the rotary god, you just hold it into gear. But for me, that's not really an option. Well, here on the off-road, you would think that the Hummer would ride like a dream and be able to conquer everything with its off-road capabilities, when in fact you would be wrong. The Hummer has amazing off-road capabilities, but it does not ride super well. In fact, it will literally beat you to death. And as far as noise and fit and finish, for those of you that saw how the motorhome is and the noises it makes, the Hummer is 10 times worse, which doesn't make any sense, right? But it's a small price to pay for all the capabilities you get in this thing. Getting back to the ground clearance, well, it's a necessity if you want to go over all sorts of obstacles and clear things to not get stuck. Everything is up. The engine's up, the transmission, drivetrain is all up. This makes for an interesting ride. But really where it gets its clearance, which makes a difference over all other trucks that you might come across, is its gear reduction. I like to call it like a final drive. I've never seen any road car have it. I've only seen it on tractors, and older tractors at that, to get the gear ratios just right. Just a quick analysis of what it is. You have everything like a normal 4x4. Off the transmission, transfer case, front and rear differentials, comes off the axles, out to the hubs. But that's where it's different. In the hubs, they actually have a gear reduction, which gives you the low, super low ability to climb rocks or all terrain. The downside is that also changes your gear ratio, so it can't go very fast. I don't know, unless you're doing tons of off-roading, it might be nice to have a higher gear, even with, I don't know, what you'd say, a 4-speed transmission because it has the overdrive. I always drive in overdrive. It's very rare unless I'm climbing rocks that would actually need to use the low range in this thing. On top of the upgraded turbo, one thing that really helps is a free flow exhaust. As many of you know a lot about diesels, I'm sure it's more important than on your normal type vehicle, especially those that are turbocharged. So the upgrade turbo and the free flowing stainless steel exhaust that was made for this made a tremendous difference. Not really. However, I like to think so, for all the time and money that was spent on it. But, as you can see, either way, at least it adds a nice visual enhancement. One cool thing that the Hummer has that was great in theory, but not so great in practicality is the CTIS, Central Tire Inflation System. Onboard compressor, you're able to control your tire pressures, raise and lower on the fly. It was amazing when it was new. However, it started to leak, and it's got so many fittings. Trying to chase it is a job in itself. You fix one place, then you got another place to deal with, and it was never ending. I don't know how many times I just threw my hands up and even sent it to the dealer, and even they told me that it's just non-stop for them. But that's good job security. So what I ended up doing in the end was actually I would isolate them. So I would only activate it if I was going to do off-roading or go to the sand dunes. That way I wouldn't come back to it all the time and have flat tires. Speaking of tires, when I first got this, it was a pain. There weren't very many tires available, and they were only using a Goodyear mil-spec tire that cost a fortune, would ride terrible, more terrible than it rides now, and it was hard to find, extremely expensive. So what I ended up doing was, luckily, Nita wanted to move into the off-road market, and they were nice enough to have somebody, I don't even remember who, build me custom wheels so I could run 18-inch Terra grapplers. These made the truck perform amazing. This was a huge change for the Hummer, not only in ride, off-road capability. It wasn't a full-on mud or off-road tire, but it was a good middle-of-the-road compromise. That was the best tire combination that I've found to work on this that would cover everything that I wanted to do. It's a whole lot of fun playing in the Hummer. You could just go for days and days, and luckily, since my family has so much open ground, it's like a playground. I could just keep going until my back goes completely out and I need surgery, or I run out of fuel. Both of those things could come sooner than later. Other than that, I will just keep on playing, and you have a good weekend. See you next time.